Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Keith, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. You are
Good to be here.
You are a renowned guest through Lawline. When Sigal had her podcast, Lawyers Who Lead, you were on it twice. And you have been an integral partner of Lawline and friend of mine. I don't know. It feels like a decade, but it hasn't been that long. But you've always been an innovative and forward-thinking individual in the legal space and beyond. So I'm really excited to have you back on Lawline and our podcast now, which is Lawyers Who Learn, because lifelong learning happens beyond the CLE course. And there's a lot you can share in there. I have a lot of questions to get started, but before I do, I'm just going to share a couple things that stood out to me from your conversations with Sigal a couple of years ago. This way we can touch on it, but this way we don't have to necessarily copy everything that's on there. But one of the, and then I'll go through it and then we'll see what I have wrong. One of the things that I always loved that you had a couple of years ago was something called Lawyer Smack, which is essentially a Slack channel for like-minded individuals in law. And I loved what you were ahead of your time there. So I'm very curious of what's happening with that. Even before that, you were inspired by Ari Kaplan, who had that book called Opportunity Maker, which I was in. And you had started a blog called Associate's Mind in Law School. We both believe in the beginner's mindset called Shoshin, right? Shoshin. Yep. And we both believe, and maybe we'll get into it today, the need for reform in law school. Actually, I just had Jordan Furlong on our podcast, and it's titled Why You Don't Need a Third Year of Law School. Currently, you're the CMO of Case Status. You're also a partner in Big Law Investor. And I think, and two lines that I love that you said with Sigal is you're a high-functioning introvert, which I can agree with that in myself. And then this is something that I also relate to. Everyone is suffering in some way, so be patient and be kind with them because there's always some baggage there. So did I cover your gamut a little bit? I didn't cover the practicing of law and all that stuff because you have so much going on in your life. I can't get it all.
There's a lot going on. One, just note, I left Case Status a couple of years ago and I'm just full-time with Big Law Investor, and that's a whole big conversation about that. But I was at Case Status as CMO for 3 years, good experience. And it was interesting, but the past 2 years has been just full-time with BLI.
Got it. So before we get into that and some of what we talked about, you speak a lot on law. I'm sure you speak a lot on AI now, on innovation and what's happening in the future. Is there conversation that you wish, if you were on a podcast or you were talking to somebody else, that you're not asked about as much when you think about your learning journey and your growth journey? And if you could, you would dedicate the rest of this podcast, or at least a few minutes, to saying, here's what I really want to talk about, instead of the same 5 bullets that I talk about all the time. And if not, that's fine too. We can just go on and circle back to that later.
Yeah, in the context of learning and growing, and I think learning and growth indicate change, right? So something's changed. If you're learning and you're growing, you're not static, right? There's some type of change is happening. And I think something that's really interesting for people is often when people talk about change or what they're doing, it's often a very additive conversation. They're talking about, oh, I'm going to do something, so I'm going to do this different in my life. I'm going to add this thing. I'm going to manage this. I'm going to do that, whatever. When personally, I found like real change, sustainable change is often about what you remove, right? It's about taking things away, right? There's famous, I can't remember the business professor, strategy is everything you decide not to do, right? If the business strategy is, oh, we're not doing all these other things, well, what's left? Whatever's left is that's what you're doing, right? I think there's a real aspect in learning or personal growth that is so often people, because they're change motivated and so many people are like type A and they want to go and add things. Actually, if you're making really sustainable change, oftentimes that involves sacrifice, right? I wrote a book for the ABA years ago called The Marble and the Sculptor. And it's a famous quote from a Nobel Prize winner, which is, a man cannot make himself a man may not remake himself without suffering because he's both the marble and the sculptor, meaning to really change, oftentimes, like if you want to shift habits or something, I have a bad habit and I want a good habit. You can't just stack the good habit on top of the bad habit. A lot of times you have to figure out a way. How can you remove things in your life? And oftentimes I feel like there are barriers to people to change and learning, is that people aren't willing to maybe decide what to remove from their life.
And are you saying, because most of the time people talk to you about all the different things that you're doing versus where you suffered along the way. So I don't know if you can, again, we didn't prep for this, so I don't expect you to have this top of mind, but are there things that on that topic that you have removed over the years that might have been painful, but they were learning? And because, yeah, that is my theme of you, is you do so many different things all the time. And so tell us that, I don't want to call it the darker side, but what are the things that if somebody else is listening to this can give them, they can relate to be like, okay, maybe I should cut these few things out of what I do every day.
Yeah, I mean, again, zero preparation. I'm firing from the hip here. Certainly people like, oh, I want a better exercise habit, or I want more business development, or I want to spend more time with my kids, or there's a wide variety of things, but again, there's only 24 hours in the day.
All right, let's take a real thing, lawyer smack.
Sure.
Where are you at with lawyer smack today? How does that fall into
sure,
what with the remove or adding on in terms of your growth journey?
Yeah, sure. So for the past couple of years, lawyer smack, which is, again, avoiding the long-term conversation about IP law, which I would love to dive into because I have all types of opinion about intellectual property law at this point. Lawyer smack is now called Sidebar because for a variety of reasons. It has been on the back burner because I've been doing so many other things. The community's there for sure, and it's self-sustaining at this point. There's still thousands of messages every week exchanged in there and lawyers having conversations. But in terms of me actively promoting it or growing it for the past couple of years, I had to look at everything I was doing and say, okay, I only have 24 hours in a day. I've got projects I'm working on. There's work I'm doing. I'm going to spend time with my family. Nominally, I try to maintain some type of exercise. If you are someone who's trying to do a lot of things, by virtue of doing a lot of things, as many things as you might feel like you're doing, there's a million things you're not, right? And so I guess I'm really talking about prioritization. Like, what are priorities in your life? What areas of your life are I have a standard for this part of my life and I'm going to hit it. And if I'm going to hit that standard, then other parts of my life might be compromised.
Yeah, no, I always felt like in our conversations, there's so much opportunity with community. And I think that was even the title of your podcast with Sigal about how to build and grow community. What I've always loved about you is you look inside yourself as you grow. And a classic story, which we've talked about a lot, but just to repeat here, is when you were living under a staircase.
Oh yeah.
Can you take us through that for a moment? And while you're doing that, I want to pull up a quote that I want to talk about afterwards. But
sure,
because to me, how does that fit into what you started with, things that you need to remove in order to grow?
Sure, yeah.
It just seems like you removed a lot to do that.
Oh yeah, there was a lot. There was a huge removal period. So when I was younger, early 20s, I'd graduated college, worked for a year in a law firm, a big firm for Alabama, as a gopher, project assistant. I was getting ready to go to law school, and I had a young life crisis. I don't know. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on with my life? Trying to figure out relationships. What did I want to do with my life? This, that, and the other. And the only thing at the time that really made sense to me, this was, or maybe right around 2000. I was doing martial arts. I was doing one particular martial art called Yoshinkan Aikido. And the head of our organization happened to be in Canada and ran in Japanese is ushideshi, which is inside student, meaning most people who are students of any martial arts school are outside the school. They come in, they take class 3 times a week. There's certain Japanese schools will still do this ushideshi, which is much more akin to how it was originally practiced. It's like an apprentice model, meaning you go there, you live inside the school, and all you do is train. So I moved there. I lived there for a year. My room was a storage closet. Like the school was on the top floor, and then there was an underground basement. You went downstairs to the underground basement. There was a storage closet underneath the stairs. I lived in a storage closet for a year, slept on a tatami rice mat that's 1 inch thick. I slept on the floor, and all my possessions were what I could fit in inside probably 2 suitcases. And I lived that way for a year. And yeah, I removed everything in my life, essentially. I removed my family and friends. I removed my job. I removed my environment, the entire outside world, to pick and say, I'm going to focus on doing one thing and see how good I can get at doing this one thing for a year. And that's what I did.
Is this a story you tell a lot, or is this something that we just talked about and you haven't really brought up?
No, I talk about it on occasion. It's a deeper thing. I actually enjoy talking. Always enjoy our conversations. I like having deep conversations with people. Typically speaking, a lot of business conversations are superficial, but
Yeah.
I think the deeper conversations are really important, because even though that was over 20 years ago for me, and it was only 1 year of my life, it was such an intense period of my life. It continues to be influential. So
I'm going to read you a couple quotes, and I think maybe this will take us to the direction for at least part of the interview
sure.
going next, or the conversation, I should say. So there's a book that I'm reading, or read and I'm reading again. It's called Arete by Brian Johnson.
Okay.
If you haven't heard of it, you have to buy it, and I'll tell you more about it in a little bit. And there's all these micro lessons in there. There's actually 451, because 451 is the degrees that you can actually ignite a fire.
Yeah.
So one of them is called the dojo decision. And when you go to learn karate or in a dojo, you can make a decision. You're either there to go through the motions and just learn karate or do it, or you're there for mastery, to get the black belt, to become where you want to be. And when I hear you tell that story, I think of the person who's there for mastery. Obviously, you didn't go that for the rest of your career, but in that moment, for that 1 year, you did that. And the reason that to me is important, and the term arete, by the way, is a Greek term that essentially means living the best version of yourself from moment to moment. It's your best virtues and your best excellence. And that essentially is what we're all trying to be. And there's 2 quotes from Abraham Maslow that I think is something that I always think about, and I feel like you do as well, and we all do to some degree. And what Abraham Maslow says is, at any given moment, we can step forward for growth or backward for safety. And as Brian put it, it's either +1 or -1. And so Maslow says, if you deliberately plan on being less than you're capable of being, then I warn you, you'll be unhappy for the rest of your life. And he goes on to say, what one can be, one must be. And I think about that because me and you do go deep. And for me, there's no question I'm not what I can be. I am not there yet. And I think a lot of us relate to that on a regular basis, but we don't even take the actions to get us there. And so think about you, and I wonder where you fall on this, between all that you've written books, you've built companies, you've advised, you're the best networker that I know. To some degree, though, I don't know, what is it that you think, if you had to think about what is it that your superpower is, where do you believe that you should be, is when you think about what you need to do to get there? Is that something that's in your mind, and as you think about your day-to-day, whether it's in law or legal tech or AI or personal life? Because I would love to just dissect that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's certainly, I don't think you can be growing. I think a lot of people have aspirations for growth or change or learning, but they oftentimes just remain aspirations, right? Unless there is intentionality behind what you're going for. Someone once described to me how if you decide something is going to happen, and people are like, oh, I make decisions. Oh, I decided that. No, when you make a decision, a true decision, a real decision, it should feel like gravity. It should be inescapable. It is something that is happening. You're like, I have decided I'm going to run a 5K, and you've never run a 5K before. And a lot of people, oh, maybe I do the Couch to 5K app or this, whatever. But they don't ever decide, like, really set your will to change. And I think the biggest thing for me is maybe what is my will or intention around this or that, but in a broadly speaking, is just growth. Like, I want to learn. Like, again, Shoshin, again, the first website I ever had, Associate's Mind, which is a play on beginner's mind, which, because the full Shoshin Shogai in Japanese, the whole thing is to have a beginner's mind for your entire life.
Yeah.
Which is to say that it's because in the master's mind, the possibilities are few, meaning a master who has seen all the ways of something's happened, their mind becomes static and they're like, oh, I've seen this before. The options are A, B, or C. Whereas if you're a beginner, you go, the options are the entire alphabet plus some numbers and that color I like. You're so foolish. You don't know what's wrong. But that sort of wide-eyed, I'm learning. It's more to indicate the idea that you are going to be a sponge to try and learn from things. I like that. And I like, learning is not something, anyone who thinks learning is something that you did in school and that stopped when you got your JD however many years ago, and you're like, I'm good. That's ridiculous. Obviously, lawyers, we all have CLEs we have to take, but even beyond that, like, I have a very intentional learning practice. There are podcasts I listen to regularly. There are books I like to read and reread because I want to grow and be more, that I make the time for these things. Now, what does that mean? Maybe I don't go out during the week and spend time with friends as much, or this or whatever. Again, there's a balancing act. There is.
By the way, it's a very fair answer because it's something that actually, it was my birthday yesterday. And
my son's birthday yesterday.
August 3rd, baby. Yeah.
August 3rd. That's a good birthday club.
So I'm 48 and feel 24. And to some degree, I can't fully answer that question either, because to some degree, I've accomplished a lot of the professional accomplishments. If I had to write them down when I was in my 20s, maybe I would have had a bigger business by now and a bigger impact, right? Sure. And I would be speaking more and I'd do more things. But to some of the checklist box, I'm like, okay, that's good. And where I have to sit down, and I think a lot of people in midlife, we need to recalibrate what does the next 20 years look like, 25 years, because one thing I know for sure, and this is a thing that we all say, is we want to be sure our best days are ahead of us, not behind us. And that takes intention. And so there's a really exciting thing happening now with AI. The beginner's mindset is perfect for that. So take us through, first of all, what is Big Law Investor? Sure. And take us through how you're applying this beginner's mindset. Because I think I'm trying to do, I know I'm doing more than some, but when I look at others, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so behind in terms of where I could be. And I think about applying it internally at work, but also with legal tech. So take us through a little bit of that, because it's a good segue, I think.
Sure. First, you've done a ton. I think anybody would be very satisfied with your career if they retired tomorrow. So don't feel bad about that. You've had a very significant impact. But Big Law Investor was founded by now my business partner, Josh Holt. He was an associate at Goodwin Procter for a number of years. And he got into it coming from Big Law and was concerned about personal finances, as most new young lawyers are. I think the last statistics I looked at from the ABA was that, this was a couple of years old, but I think the average law student graduates law school with, I believe, $167,000 in student loan debt. So you graduate law school, a lot of money. If you get a big law job, great, right? You're making $250,000 a year out the gate. There's 1.3 million lawyers in the United States. There's maybe 100,000 big law lawyers, maybe. The odds of you getting one of those jobs are realistically not that great. So that means most people graduate law school, a lot of debt. And I'm sure y'all talked about like the bimodal salary distribution of lawyers. There's a big spike over here that's like big law where they make a lot of money, but the average and the bimodal, the U is actually
I'm with you. A lot of debt.
Yeah, a lot of debt. So anyway, made the site. It's about personal finance for attorneys. And that now there's a lot of, say, for doctors, there's probably a dozen personal finance sites for doctors.
What do you mean personal finance for attorneys? So
Anything about money, meaning what do you do with your debt?
is it a software? What is it?
So we are we're just an informational resource. If you go to bigelawinvestor.com and just click start here, it's going to drop down and it's going to have all types of stuff, how to create your budgets, how to do 401ks, how to do stealth IRAs, like how to do anything you would do around your money. Then on top of that, what we do is we connect people to certain financial products and services that we've built relationships with over years. For example, I talked about student loan debt. We work with all the student loan refinancing companies. So SoFi, Earnest, MoFin, all the people that service student loan debt. We have exclusive relationships with them where if you go to us and we say, hey, we collect your information, you're a lawyer, we send you to them, they give you like $1,000 cashback bonus. We have these relationships where you get
so that's the core business, helping them refinance their student loan debt.
That's one of the things we do. The other thing, we own the term JD mortgage trade. So if you're a lawyer, you can go to a bank. There are professional loan programs where if you have a JD, say I have a JD and this is my employment, they'll give you a no PMI, zero down up to $800,000 loan, meaning you can get these very favorable loan options that are only available to doctors, lawyers. But how do you find those? Us. We have software that matches people to this.
It's interesting because those two premises are oxymoron a little bit, because you're stating that lawyers struggle with money and they struggle with understanding money, and then you're introducing more money instruments to help them with their lack of understanding of money, where they might not understand.
Education is a big part of what we do.
And how do you educate them besides the blog, what's on the site?
That's the core of it. We've written so much. We have thousands and thousands of articles at this point.
Doesn't this start way before law school? Because I'm personally very passionate about financial literacy. And you can go back into New York State as an example, where I live. Several times they've tried to pass in high school, in public high school, to the programs to do it, and it's been denied. For maybe it's too hard to do, maybe there is policies against it, but it's arguably the most important thing besides self-improvement, self-help, self-worth, that you need to understand going into college and going beyond that. And it's not taught anywhere. And so I'm just curious, how big a problem do you guys see this as? And I love that you're doing it, but I wonder, from the education standpoint, let's say Lawline wanted to get involved in educating lawyers in this area. How can we help?
Yeah, a big part of it is just really, I think, to your point, personal finance and home economics should be like taught your senior year in high school or something. That's such a it feels like the most non-offensive statement that everybody, no matter wherever you fall on the spectrum of how you think about the world, hey, wouldn't it be good if the average American citizen had a basic standard of financial literacy? 100%, but that's not the case. That's just not the case at all. And it's not there. So people say you have managed to go graduate from high school, you've gone to college, made it good enough, took the LSAT, got enough scores, got into law school, you're graduating, say you're 25, 26, 27. I mean, hopefully you would think you have some literacy around the topic, but even then, again, what do people have time for? All I've got time for is law school. Again, being smart about financial literacy is an intentionality problem. And I think for a lot of what we find is a lot of people, their first year, their second year right out of law school, they go, finally, I can take my foot off the pedal. I got a break. Oh, good. I'm making some money. Oh shit. I have a lot of debt. What do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do. What's an IRA? They have all these things. And again, these are smart people. They've gone to law school, but definitionally they're above average. But
it is part of the potential solution. This is a topic that I love to talk about, and we brought it out briefly before. The cost of law school doesn't have to be that. And you mentioned in your interview with Sigal, the third year of law school, maybe it should be internships or externships or working or writing. And ideally, hopefully that brings the cost down to some degree. But there's also things you've talked about in the past, like what's going to happen with the unauthorized practice of law. There's new with AI and platforms. It's just, you have a lawyer in your pocket. And lawyers have lawyers in their pockets with all this. And there's sites that are just going to be doing it. And there's a whole access to justice problem. Not
Yeah.
that you've thought about this more than me, I would presume, because you're very involved in these areas. How do we move forward from making education more valid? And this, of course, is in college as well, but how do we solve this now that we
Yeah.
have
So
more tools?
yeah, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. Yes, totally. I think law school, the third year is superfluous. I think it was Justice Scalia said any law school course that you see in law school that starts with the law and you can skip. It's like the law and Harry Potter or whatever. It's the third year is largely superfluous. Certainly a factor I think that isn't getting talked about is student loans just got nuked from orbit. All that was redone. Now there is a cap, right? There is a cap, $200,000 cap on public, like federally funded student loans. $200,000 is going to get you, if you're at a top law school or a top medical school, that's going to get you about a year and a half, right? Maybe 2 years. Then you're going to be, now the answer, the only answer, if you want to continue down that road, is private loans. So suddenly there's going to be this unfolding of the next few years. What do professional schools who used to have unlimited money coming from the government, federally backed loans,
When did that change?
last month?
Okay.
It's like brand new. It was in the big package that
It
just
was
got,
in the
it was
bill.
in the big beautiful bill. It was in the beautiful bill.
Okay,
And
I actually didn't.
most
even
people
know
don't know that. Most people
I
are
did
not
not
aware
know
of it.
that.
But the big beautiful bill completely changed postgraduate education. So student loans that you are now capped at 200,000.
Well, honestly, I'm in favor of it because I think that public loans artificially inflates the cost of school because it's so easy to get.
100%, 100%. So hopefully that does begin to act as a bring the ceiling down some, because the federal government has said, look, we're out of subsidizing these schools growing forever. You're going to get X amount of money and then that's it. So I think one, that will put some downward pressure, hopefully, on schools. And that could, maybe they decide to eliminate the third year or transfer the third year.
What do you, from your experience, what do you, if we wanted to eliminate a third year, what needs to happen? It's the ABA?
It's probably the ABA, because the ABA sets the accreditation standards that most states follow. Again, every state is actually their own independent body. They can make whatever standards they use to accredit their lawyers. But most follow the ABA. It would, minus where big enough states were like California. California, you can still read the law. California's a big enough state to be like, yeah, stick it, ABA. We're going to approve things in our own way.
And how does unauthorized practice of law fit into this with now that AI and all these new online platforms can be your lawyer without necessarily a lawyer being?
Sure. Yeah. UPL, unauthorized practice of law, it's been going on for years. Bar associations in particular, who are supposed to be the gatekeepers of these things, are not equipped to deal with this. It's too much, it's too fast, too much change that's coming down the pipe. And there's a couple, you have states like Arizona, Nevada that have established sandboxes where you can go in and, all right, we're going to create these environments where they're like testing grounds for people to come in and have limited practice areas. Although it's certainly already happening. I think it was Deloitte, one of the big four firms came in and were like, hey, we're going to do one of those in Arizona. And it's, that's coming. That there are these other people that are going to come and practice law. And I see two sides of it, because on the one, 2 weeks ago, we do a newsletter too. In the newsletter, 2 weeks ago, I highlighted there was a shortage in Oklahoma, I believe, was talking about just legal deserts. Something, if the state of Oklahoma has 74 counties, they have a lawyer shortage, which is, I think, described as less than one lawyer per 1,000 residents.
Yeah.
I think they have a lawyer shortage and like 65 of them. It is a desert if you need legal practice. Hawaii, just this past week, it's been impossible to get in and practice whatever. Hawaii just removed all the rules. They were like, if you have a license and want to come practice in Hawaii, you don't have to take the state bar.
Where did you learn this?
That happened literally this week.
Hawaii says if you're a New York lawyer, come practice here.
Come practice. They used to make you take their Hawaii bar, and
that's huge.
Yeah, it was a big change. So suddenly they said, hey, we need people here.
Yeah. And
so there's what, and if you listen to people like Jack Newton, the CEO of Clio, they talk about, hey, there's this latent, untapped, multi-billion-dollar market for legal services that people don't go to because they can't afford going to law schools. We just talked about how much student debt. So you're going to graduate with $70,000 in debt. Being a lawyer is expensive. You have to charge higher fees than your typical American can make. And so suddenly people are deciding between, oh, I'm going to use some AI legal service or this lawyer that I could get. People are deciding between, I have nothing, I'm going to do nothing at all, or I'm going to talk to an AI legal service, which maybe it's wrong, maybe it's not. I don't know, but it's better than nothing, which was actually their option. And there's all too. And obviously, the AI is not perfect. There was actually here in Birmingham, it was last month, a judge actually, one law firm had cited some hallucinated cases and something they filed in federal court, and it was done by, I think, by an associate at the firm, but all the senior counsel signed off on it, went to the judge. Judge released an order last month saying, hey, you're removed from the case, public notice this has happened. Oh, and the other thing you have to do, you have to take this order and send it to every client, every opposing counsel, every judge, and every single lawyer in your law firm. Painful. The AI still has problems, but for, again, your average person, they can't afford a lawyer. So it's the choices, the choices between something that might have some accuracy and can help me or nothing. And I think that's where we are.
And look, I know we're going to inch deep here on many different topics. So I appreciate you following me along the ride. How are you using AI in your day-to-day, if at all, besides the basic, if it's just a basic ChatGPT summarize, help with editing, is there anything in the next level that you've been able to apply in your day-to-day?
Sure, certainly for anything strategy, brainstorming, research, writing, summarizing. I certainly use it day to day for all of that. It's really good at it. We use it for code a lot. Our system that our company works on, our entire team, we were on ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT came out 2 years ago. We saw it, we're blown away immediately. A couple of people that we knew that were smart were like, hey, this is about to be some next level stuff. So we were like all in. We got our team a developer account right out the gate as soon as possible. And we've been using it ever since. And our company would literally not exist if not for OpenAI. And on the programming side, it's Claude is really what we use.
Claude is unbelievable. When I saw what how our developers were using it, it was a whole nother level.
Yeah, Claude is amazing.
You mentioned Jack Newton briefly. It just seems like Clio can do no wrong. And they recently just acquired Fastcase for $1 billion. What do you think you are always at ClioCon, you're very into that scene and that community, and you've talked to a lot of different companies that are involved in their ecosystem. What do you think has made Clio so successful and continues to make them successful year after year, which it just seems not just in legal tech, but just in everything that they do seems to just shoot through the roof?
Again, intentionality and standards. I think having watched Clio from right when I got out of law school 15 years ago and being at the ABA Tech Show and before they even had their own conference and stuff, and seeing them being a small startup and going over the years, they've always had this very ruthless focus. And I don't mean ruthless in a bad way, but they have a ruthless focus on driving a good customer experience. If you talk to people who are a lot of lawyers who use a variety of software products for whatever their practice is, whether it's the actual practice management software, or if they're in bankruptcy and they use some type of bankruptcy stuff, or they're in immigration and they use some type of docketing. And there's all these different types of software tools or IP, and you're doing stuff to look up the USPTO. None of those lawyers are suddenly, oh, I'm defined by being a immigration docket software attorney.
I get all this.
But a lot of them will say for Clio, they'll be like, oh, I am like part of their professional identity as a lawyer is being a Clio
Yeah.
user. And the only way to get that is if Clio is focused on that customer experience in such a way to
I
cultivate
get it.
their users.
I get it. It's just again, not that we have the answers, but there was a lot of competitors 15 years ago, or there's a
Sure.
couple, and over the years there's been a lot, but they've certainly figured out, and they went into payment processing now. They're into legal research, and they've gone different areas. It's amazing to watch because we know 15 years ago how small Clio was and where they are
Yeah.
today. It's an inspiration for us all, for me as well. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that for a minute, and then what I'd like to end on, and what you mentioned before. So hopefully you have some ideas, and feel free. Some people take their phones and look at their Kindles or their Audible. I love to hear of books that you have read. And like you said, there's some that you read again and again, similar to me. And then second part to that is, what have you read recently that's been impactful? So those two questions.
Sure. Right now, I'm actively rereading. Do you know the company Farnham Street?
No.
Farnham Street is a company by a Canadian guy named Shane Parrish. Shane, 30-second background. Shane was in the equivalent of the Canada's CIA. So he was he was a brand new person, CIA. Then 2 weeks after he started, 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And he was like, oh God. And he felt thrust into the situation where people were asking him all types of information, and he was having to look at things and make good decisions in real time. That was very intense. And he became very into making better decisions. And so he started thinking about, like, how can I get better at that? And what do I do? And he looked about and thought about all the people he admired. And some of the people he admired most were Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, and Charlie Munger, who's the number two. Berkshire Hathaway, if you go to it, is on Farnham Street. That is literally the street that the company is on. And so he started a blog called Farnham Street, which has now gone to this huge thing. He has a podcast called The Knowledge Project that I'm an avid listener. I re-listen to it all the time. And what he decided was, like, hey, who's really good at making decisions that are like high stakes under pressure? Traders. And so he started interviewing a lot of traders, and then it blew up. It took off. And then he quit whatever the Canadian CIA is, and he's done this full time ever since. And the entire thing is to learn from lessons from the mistakes other people have had. So he has on sports psychologists. He has on the heads of the largest hedge funds in the world, or he'll have a behavioral psychologist, or he had the person who won the international storytelling, or the best storyteller in the world. He'll have him on. Tell me how you cultivate stories and create stories, or a child psychologist. And he's written a few books. He has a series of books called The Great Mental Models. And it's about, which is something Charlie Munger talks about. I can't remember the guy who actually created the concept of mental model, but the idea that there are these models you can have about the world, and the more models you have about how the world works, if mental model, if all you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, that's a model. And if you've only got one hammer, you go around the world trying to hammer things. Having a multitude of mental models allows you to have a toolbox of models that when you approach a new problem, you can try and look at the model from different perspectives. And I think he's a great writer. He's a good interviewer. He has all these
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. Knowing you will love it. You'll start listening to it, and you'll be like, this is fantastic.
My challenge is just like being able to settle down and read new things when you have so many books that I want to reread. I'm going to be compiling a list through AI of all my interviews of all the books. Any other books that are worth mentioning to be on that list?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, take a look. Take a pause.
If you're a lawyer, probably every lawyer should read this book.
I can't see. It's focused on the back. Managing the professional service firm. Okay.
This is written by David Meister. He essentially invented professional management.
Okay.
If a professional services firm, accounting, lawyer, this guy he's the one who did it. It's really good. My other bookcases over there. For a lawyer, that's a good one. What else? That's just like absolutely worth reading.
Are there books that fundamentally from 15 years ago as an entrepreneur that you go back to, some of the classics that you stick to and were instrumental in your growth early on?
I haven't read Ari's book in a long time, but Ari's book, when I read it in law school, very influential.
Ari's another one. I interviewed him on the podcast.
Ari's great.
So good at building community and energy
Yeah.
and bringing the momentum there. And final question, since if anything pops in your head, books, feel free to say it. You did mention podcasts with this. Is there any other podcasts that you do listen to regularly?
Yeah. So again, Farnham Street's The Knowledge Project. I absolutely listen to that regularly. I will listen to Naval's podcast. I'll actually listen to his original one, usually once or twice a year.
What is that?
A gentleman by the name of Naval Ravikant, Naval is his first name, just Naval.
Okay.
He was the CEO and founder of AngelList. He early investor in Uber, Twitter, all the things, very prolific investor. He has an ongoing podcast that's like short little snippets, but he recorded a podcast a few years ago with a very pithy title that he wishes he hadn't native, but it's like how to get rich or something very like that. But it's not, he did that to be silly. But what it is, it's him going through the foundational process of how he views the world and money, influence, and investing and self-improvement. And it's very compelling. And I mean, I probably listen to that once a year because it's one of those things that is absolutely evergreen and timeless. As you're listening to it, there's nothing that's about, oh, today. It's no, foundational principles to build on. And he's very intelligent and he was a latchkey kid, came here from India with nothing, with a single mom, and then has gone on to become this prolific investor. And great story, very good storyteller, and just a very wise person. When you're listening to him, you're like, got it. So I would highly encourage people to listen to him.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. Two really big nuggets of information that someone can take and learn from.